Hi folks, Dave here. Today we're in the studio, and up to this point we've identified the need for honesty, integrity, and leadership in politics. We've also identified that there are a number of issues being caused by the continued growth of government. One of these is the current state of the economy and how this impacts employment in the United States. With $3.8 trillion planned for spending in fiscal year 2011, an increase of nearly 10% from just 2 years ago, and 25% of our gross domestic product, it's not hard to see how money that's being taken out of the private sector and being reallocated to the public sector has a catastrophic impact on our ability to recover and for millions of Americans to once again find work. What's worse is that this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Washington's spending plans. If things proceed unchanged, our deficit will rise from $1.3 trillion this year to $8.5 trillion over 10 years. This will double our national debt and set us into a tailspin that we simply will not be able to recover from. This out-of-control spending must be addressed now. There are two things that I'm going to be famous for in the U.S. Senate. First is eliminating government programs, and second, cutting taxes. No one, regardless of party or position, will stand in my way of getting this done. This is the type of leadership required for us to emerge from our current economic woes, and it's the essence of how government is supposed to function. Look, these two things are not out-of-the-box thinking. This is, quite simply, the job of every elected official and something they're all supposed to do, or something they're all supposed to strive for. I'm going to issue a warning. It's interesting how many people will talk about reducing government and cutting taxes, but words have become cheap. You'll hear these suggestions from several people running for office, because these words are the types of words candidates use to get elected, but then forget about once they're in office. That's why it's so critical that you know who's behind the words, and that you know that when they say them, they mean them. And I mean what I say. I'll follow through. I will shrink government, and I will cut taxes. Now, with all this said, let's talk about each of these things one at a time. First, eliminating government programs. And here's the deal. If you're not part of the solution, ultimately you're part of the problem. Well, we've got lots of government jobs that aren't adding a bit of value to our lives, and they're costing us a heck of a lot. That's a problem. How do we fix this? Simple. Evaluate each agency that receives funding from the taxpayers, determine if they serve a function that we can't do without, and if not, fire them. This may appear to be a daunting task with numerous difficult decisions, but it's not for me. It's not because it's the right thing to do. And if we're going to survive financially, it has to be done. Of the top 25 government program spending categories, only 6 have actually gone down as a percentage of the total budget in the last 40 years. Among these are defense, veterans benefits, and science and space funding, all of which directly relate to our safety and global peace. Among the largest increases in spending are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, housing subsidies, and food stamps. Now, some of these are promises we've made as a society to our neediest citizens, but others are ripe with fraud and abuse and need to be evaluated, monitored, and controlled. Just reducing 10% of the cost of these programs by eliminating fraud and abuse would save taxpayers $170 billion per year. If we identify fraud and abuse across all the spending categories and reduce their cost 10%, we'd cut out almost $400 billion, which is more than 1.5 times the amount that we're spending just on interest of our debt each year. So in summary, eliminating government programs is part 1. And once we do this, moving to part 2, which is cutting taxes, becomes really easy. First, we need to understand the very basic premise that even low taxes are bad for an economy, and that higher taxes are exponentially worse. Among the most growth-prohibitive taxes to an economy trying to find its legs again is the capital gains tax. So we need to freeze capital gains taxes for investment in new ventures through 2012. then convert them to home ownership style reinvestment moving forward, which means capital gains made after 2012 would not be taxed if they're reinvested into another company within 24 months. This would flood the marketplace with new venture investments, create new jobs, and spur economic activity immediately. It would also alleviate the credit crunch we're in right now with banks because the investments would be coming from private individuals. Once these new ventures get off the ground, banks will see them as less risky, and the entire credit market will, by natural mechanisms, once again loosen up. We also need to eliminate other taxes that have an oppressive effect as well, like the estate tax and the hidden taxes we pay in the form of fees and surcharges, which are usually applied to small business owners just so they can get a permit to do business. We must also cut the corporate tax rate to 10%, which is a quarter of what it is right now. In doing so, labor will relocate back to the U.S. and will make it attractive for foreign companies to set up headquarters here as well. We'll base this tax on the corporation's added value, that is, the total purchases minus their total sales, and they'll pay for it quarterly to help simplify the payment structure. It's important to note that this is not a corporate income tax, so it doesn't punish companies for doing well. Next, we have to eliminate the current progressive individual income tax and move to a consumption-based tax. This gives more people more money to spend in the economy, allowing companies to produce and sell more, which leads them to expanding and hiring people. Lastly, we must cut future tax revenue amounts to a maximum of 19% of the GDP. Right now, our government's tax revenue goal is 25% of our nation's economic output. This is ridiculously high, and it's simply a symptom of a government that is too big. Now, all of this may seem a little boring to some of you, but it's crucial, it's important. The job of a U.S. Senator is to constantly strive to reduce the size of government and to cut taxes. The natural result of these actions is the building of a strong economy that employs Americans. Keep in mind, these are two things that are catalysts behind job growth, and beyond this, it makes us more competitive on the global scale. So you can see, you can't simply address the economy or job creation without also taking on the systemic cause of the problem, the size of government and taxes. Without elected officials who are disciplined enough to stop spending and brave enough to take on the challenge of cutting wasteful government programs, bureaucracies, and tenure-based entitlements, then we'll never get closer to solving the economic challenges facing us today, and millions of our friends and neighbors will continue to lose their jobs. The good news, however, is that throughout history, Americans have stood up and banded together in times like these. We know this is our country, it's our government, it's our future. And together, like we have in times past, we'll rise to the occasion now, and it will once again be a bright new morning in America. My name is Dave Westlake, and I'm running for the United States Senate, and I promise you this: I will shrink government, and I will cut taxes.